In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. Now we want to work with similarities and differences between pragmatics on one side and discourse on the other. So we are on page 2 and we are going to continue from the new paragraph, which is first let us look at the context. Okay? Well, the idea is that in this chapter, in this part, we want to say how similar pragmatics is to discourse and discourse to pragmatics. That's it. Well, page 2 says, first, let us look at a context. Both pragmatics and discourse analysis study the meaning of words in context. You know, we studied in earlier semester that pragmatics is the study of meaning in context, not dictionary meaning, okay? Both pragmatics and discourse analysis look at the meaning like this. They don't actually look at the meaning of words and sentences, etc., etc. Of course, they do look at those things as well. But the point is that in addition to the semantic meaning, the semantic aspect, they look at other things like the context, okay? So this is one difference between, one similarity between semantics, between discourse analysis and pragmatics. The second feature that pragmatics and discourse analysis have in common is that paragraph 2, the new paragraph of page 2, okay? Somehow in the middle of the page, okay? This is the second paragraph after the introduction in the paragraph that ended at the top of the page. This is the second paragraph. The second feature that pragmatics and discourse analysis have in common is that they both look at discourse. Discourse analysis studies discourse, and pragmatics again looks at the discourse, okay? There are two approaches. Discourse analysis for sure has a look at the discourse, and pragmatics has got the same thing. What is a discourse? The use of language and text. They look at the text as well, okay? Or pieces of spoken or written discourse concentrating on how stretches of language become meaningful and unified for their users. Okay, Cook, 1989. Okay, and this sentence is important for you to understand the similarities between the two approaches. Discourse analysis calls the quality of meaningful and unified as coherence. Okay, so when you study discourse analysis, you are talking about coherence. You remember we talked about coherence and cohesion earlier in the previous course with me. So discourse analysis looks at the text and says how they are in fact interrelated to each other. Related or interrelated to each other. How they are in fact members of the same family, relatives, etc., etc. Well, sentences, etc., etc. are within a paragraph are members of the big paragraph. Or paragraphs of a bigger discourse are in fact members of a bigger genre, okay? Now, the same type of approach is taken by pragmatics, which calls everything as relevance, okay? So in pragmatics, we talk about the relevant, how relevant how relevant what we say is to the situation that we have. Relevant or irrelevant. So pragmatics talks about that relevance, okay? And discourse analysis talks about coherence. Well, syntax and semantics talk about grammaticality. So there are three things. Grammaticality. Is the sentence grammatical? Is the sentence meaningful? These are the things that are studied in syntax and semantics. But discourse analysis doesn't look at grammaticality only. In discourse analysis, we look at the coherence, as I told you. Okay, this is important as we study discourse analysis. Later, we are going to say that we have pragmatics, which actually deals with the relevance, how relevant a topic, a sentence, an utterance is to the situation, to the discourse. Okay, so both approaches, line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, line 5, says both approaches would take into account the fact that Victoria's words were intended to be seen as relevant to the courtiers. Okay? You remember? The sentence was something like this. Paragraph 2 of page 1, line 2. We are not amused. We are still working with this single sentence as an example, okay? So back to page 2. We say both approaches would take into account the fact that Victoria's words were intended to be seen as relevant to the courtiers. The courtiers' joke. And to anything that they should say afterwards. Okay? So, this is the question of discourse analysis. Okay? I'm going to tell you something about the importance of discourse and pragmatics. If you look at, good textbooks to be taught to, in fact, different age groups to learn English, you see that the table of contents of all these books include two things at the same time. Well, the table of contents for each single lesson, includes grammatical aspects and functional aspects. When we look at those functional aspects, we find that, they are talking about these types of things. Functions in language are in fact taken care of by discourse and pragmatics. For example, the books that you could say, could include, books that earlier books like Headline, you remember Headline? And the new books like Summit, like the other textbooks like, for example, others actually include these types of things, two things at the same time, grammatical aspects and functional aspects. The functional aspects include these types of things. Okay. So we are working on these aspects later on. So if actually we are going to continue to units A2 and B2 and C2 and D2, where context, etc. are studied for this part. And we are going to work on cohesion as part of our study later on, which is the realm of, the field of, in fact, the domain of actually discourse and pragmatics. Okay? Later on, we are going to talk about the relevance theory, so I'm not going to, in fact, include it just here. For short, it is part of